All right, today marks day 4 of the ceasefire between the Turkish military and Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria. Speaking at a forum in Ankara earlier today, Turkey's Recep Erdogan blasted his allies for not supporting what he calls a fight against terrorists. Meantime, the commander of the Kurdish-led forces is pleading with President Trump to leave some U.S. forces behind. This as American troops were seen leaving Syria over the weekend and now heading over to western Iraq. To discuss this a little further, we're being joined now by RT correspondent Sayeh Tavangar. Sayeh?
Yes, Manila residents of Kurdish-dominated Syrian city pelted U.S. troops with potatoes and other rotten food and shouted at them, calling them liars as they made their way out of Syria. Now, while this was happening, President Trump took to Twitter and reiterated his message of bringing back the troops. But his defense secretary, Mark Esper, undermined that very message by confirming that the troops in Syria are simply moving to western Iraq. Now, still, though, in a tweet on Sunday, while misspelling Mark Esper's name, his own defense secretary calling him Esperanto, which, by the way, I try to go on Twitter and write out Esper and see if it was an autocorrect, it would change it. It did not. So, but back to the tweet where President Trump said the ceasefire is holding up very nicely. There are some minor skirmishes that have ended quickly, new areas being resettled with the Kurds. USA soldiers are not in combat or ceasefire zones. We have secured the oil, bringing soldiers home. Now, but before he arrived in Afghanistan on Sunday, Esper told reporters that he had spoken to Iraqi leaders about the Trump administration's plan to move around 1,000 American troops from Syria to Iraq with the aim to secure oil fields and continue the fight against ISIS. Take a listen.
As I said yesterday, this withdrawal will take weeks, not days. Until that time, our forces will remain in the towns that are located near the oil fields. The purpose of those forces, working with the SDF, is to deny access to those oil fields by ISIS and others who may benefit from their revenues that could be earned.
Now, Manila, news that the Trump administration is shifting American forces from Syria to Iraq rather than returning them to the U.S. comes just 2 weeks after the Pentagon ordered 1,800 troops to Saudi Arabia. A move critics say contradicts Trump's claim that he's attempting to end what he calls repeatedly endless perpetual wars. And, you know, Manila, this is another reason that the Kurdish fighters feel betrayed, many of them accusing the U.S. of caring more about the oil fields than they do about their lives. Now, as far as the ceasefire deadline approaching, Turkey has given Kurdish fighters until 10 p.m. local time on Tuesday to leave a narrow strip of territory in northeastern Syria or face military action, which has so far claimed the lives of 85 just civilians. Now, meantime, the Turkish president blasted his allies for not supporting what he calls a fight against terrorists. He went on to say that the whole of the West, including NATO and EU countries, have sided with terrorists, referring to the YPG and PKK. And tomorrow, Erdogan plans to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi, where he'll discuss, amongst other things, troops loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who have also deployed to the border and made a deal with the Kurds. In Washington, Sayeh Tavangar, RT.
All right, for more on this fluid situation in Syria, let's turn now to former Pentagon official Mike Maloof. So, Mike, U.S. troops booed, had rotten food and fruit thrown at them as they were exiting the Kurdish region. We saw the video there. We learned today that they aren't actually coming home. They're going to Iraq. Why Iraq? Is there any significance to that move?
Sure. I mean, in one sense, it will bolster forces in Iraq to not only watch ISIS, which is actually accumulating in the same province, Anbar, in Iraq, as U.S. troops are, and also to keep that eye on Iran, of course.
Sure.
But frankly, and also it's also going to keep some troops now, we're hearing, east of the Euphrates to watch over oil fields. Now, question is,
it's always the
we
oil.
have no claim. Yeah, we have no claim over those. Yet we want to introduce investments into those areas. That's going to be a problem because we're also seeing the Russians and Turkish and Syrian forces beginning to want to move into east of the Euphrates. So stay tuned for a potential conflict.
Well, how is the Iraqi government responding to this troop movement, and what's their happenings, their thoughts?
Well,
in
they
Syria?
had a phone call from Trump.
Okay.
I think if they violently objected, he wouldn't have let him go on in. But it's as though Iraq remains split internally over whether or not to allow more U.S. troops in as opposed to kicking them all out. And so, and this is on the Shia side. So it's the government of Iraq itself is torn on a policy on further U.S. troops going in.
Yeah.
And I think that this fits into the original concept of Iraq being the hub for all of U.S. Middle East activities.
Yeah, you've been saying that on this show all year.
This just reinforces it.
Yeah, you said that the U.S. will eventually move into Iraq to keep an eye on Iran, and you know, I
and still monitor in Syria to guard its whatever forces. Now we're going to keep troops in Al Tanf, which is at the border with Syria and Jordan. And because that is a causeway for Iran, and as well as the eastern part of the Euphrates. You got some Iranian troops forming up there, and along with the Syrian and the Russians, and they're planning to push into the that oil-rich area, and that could be another potential area of conflict.
Now, you and I were talking just before we came on air about Mike Pompeo, and he's actually been kind of silent about this whole thing, but he's gone on a little trip himself.
Yes. Now, what I'm seeing here is what all of this represents is the tail end of a fundamental geostrategic shift that's occurring in that region. What has gone virtually unreported is the fact that Pompeo was in Greece on October the 7th. He signed numerous agreements, economic and military, with the Greek government. What this is suggesting is that U.S. has basically written Turkey off and conceded it to the Russians, and conceded Syria to the Russians. And in order to maintain their influence in the region, they're now looking more toward cozying up more with the Greeks, and they have signed those agreements. They're going to establish bases to allow for more military assistance to the Greeks, and to actually install new air bases in those regions, along giving them submarines and stuff like this.
That could be a move for us.
This is a major policy shift that has, as I said, gone virtually unreported, and it's also, and that's combined with the bloc that has developed against Turkey with Egypt and Israel and the United States over oil drilling rights in Cyprus.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, a really interesting turn of U.S. policy.
Yeah, and it's all designed to try and prevent the Russians from having that access to the warm waters, which has been going on for centuries, through the Aegean Sea and into the Eastern Mediterranean.
So make nice with the Greeks now.
They're making nice with the Greeks now, giving them that access in those corridors in order to try and blunt Russian influence more into the Balkans and into the Mediterranean. This is, I think that this is.
And Pompeo signed these agreements. He
signed the agreements, and I think that just getting those U.S. military guys out of there has basically conceded everything to the
so they're just
Turks. Writing it off.
Writing off Turkey. Okay,
it's a bad deal.
Right. We're moving on to the next deal. The next deal, we should keep an eye on Greece.
That's what I'm seeing as a fundamental geostrategic shift that's now occurring.
Fascinating stuff. This is why you're here. Stuff like this, that kind of analysis. Mike Maloof, always appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.